that these are the, oops, none of us remembered. So we were all taught, or those of us of a certain age were taught phonics and the different sounds of the English language. So much like as a machine writer, we're writing in syllables, voice writers are actually dictating in sound, and that's what the engine is hearing. So the first 10 minutes you're on the software, it's actually asking you to read. And so you're reading sentences that have all of those phonemes. And if you think about, sometimes you say the, and sometimes you say the, and sometimes you say a, and sometimes you say as well as all of our lovely diphthongs like ow. All of those words, those word parts, are being dictated, and they're being brought into the engine. And what the engine does is it has this incredible lexicon, this ginormous vocabulary, if you think about an unabridged dictionary. And it knows phonetically how each of those words are supposed to sound. So what it will do is it will take what you sound like and apply it to the way it's supposed to sound in that vocabulary. So yes, we're creating a new profile in our mask so that the dragon or the engine will understand us as we speak each syllable.
And something I'll add here too with your new profiles is that a lot of voice writers will make a profile when they're under the weather. So that one is like Tori's under the weather now, but that one might have your slurred speech. It has it still understands you and your overall voice, but what you wouldn't want to do is use your primary profile for those days that you're sick because it will start to conflict with how Dragon already hears you. Or in my case, it'll be my cadence. If I get an attorney that speaks really slow, I have to group my words differently now because I need the same speed that my Dragon profile is used to hearing me speak at.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, and we're going to get to that little part later about the dictation. What happens next? So, in addition to making the sounds, right? So, Dragon has now got a database of what we sound like. The next thing we do is we create our voice codes. Think about your tokens on the Steno machine, right? Your left bank is your Q, your right bank is your A, all of it is the court. So, what we have to do is create our codes. So, a Q, an A, how are we going to do our speaker tokens? How are we going to dictate our punctuation? So, we have to determine what we're going to say. Then we have to determine what it's going to look like. And then we have to train it. So if you look at the bottom of my slide, I say keek, 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 for my Q token. So I would have to go into my dragon and I would create this non-word, right? It's not a real word. And I'd say, okay, this is what you're going to hear. You're going to hear the hard K, the long E, and a hard K. And then I'm going to train it and say, this is what it sounds like. Then it's ready to go. It is a non-word in my vocabulary. So now I have keek, cack, Spee1, Spee2, Corco, Tay, whatever you have for your tokens. And then I say Pirk and whatever other, quotation marks or whatever. And then we move into my cat software because we're not done yet, right? We've got two programs that we're working with. So we've got our dragon, and then we're going to mesh with cat. So what I need to do now, once I have all of those tokens in my dragon profile, I have to go into my cat system and say, okay, when you get this raw word from the speech engine, here's how I want you to put it in my transcript. So now I go into my cat dictionary and I say, okay, the steno that you're going to get is Keek. That's the steno. And I want you to define it as whatever my Q marker looks like. So in Eclipse, it's open curly brace Q. In case cat, it would be the greater than less sign, right? F for Q. Um, so it's a little bit of work to make sure that first we've trained it, right? We know what we're going to say. Then we have to tell it what it sounds like. Then we have to bring it over into the cat software to make sure that we have the correct output in our real-time screen. So we work in our dictionaries a lot, just like a machine writer would. One of the things that I found really interesting is that I know that as a machine writer, I had a pretty extensive dictionary. I put in slop strokes all the time. If I wrote it twice the same way and it had an extra key in it, it was in my dictionary. right? So in voice writing, my dictionary is actually significantly smaller. And the answer to the why question is because most of the stuff is already going to be coming out correctly because of the vocabulary and the speech engine. So the things that I need to do in my cat dictionary are going to be things like resolving conflicts. Think about capitalization. So, for example, street and street, right? The same thing in machine writing, right? Sometimes it's capitalized, sometimes it's not. And then I do have a couple of homophones that I like to put in there. But for the most part, my dictionary work and my main dictionary is going to be the formatting that I need. So any of my macros, any of my auto includes, those are the things that go in there. So it's a much smaller dictionary. Then we can also create job dictionaries. I have a particular gig that I do all the time. It's a monthly gig. It has its own vocabulary, and I have my own brief forms for it. All of my speakers have certain tokens. I have a separate job dictionary just for that gig. So if you are an official in California and you work in a couple of different areas, like say in LA County, you've got, a division over there on the coast and you got a little bit further in, you could literally create a job dictionary for each of those different courthouses and then define your tokens in that courthouse dictionary so that you don't have to worry about it in your main dictionary. It can be just for that job. And then that way
And
you can reuse tokens.
on that point, I would definitely say this to California CSRs that may be working in court. I highly recommend that if you're an official and you work for multiple judges, because I know a lot of you guys will float to different courthouses. See if you can get that judge's script. After working with them for a while, get that script, and there's a way for you to, program that in, or just build a job dictionary that's specific to that judge and his script and who his prosecutors are. So, it's really about working smarter instead of harder. So that'll be like your next level building up towards something we'll talk about later, which will be your real time. And then I'll start on the fly. I'm really big on the fly. So in Tori's example, I mean, you really could put whatever you want in an on the fly dictionary. And when we're saying on the fly, that really equates to an Eclipse user. I think it might be called something else if you're a case or a ProCat user. Is it Tori? I don't know. It is.
You can name the dictionary anything you want.
Oh, okay.
It's the theoretical portion of what it is.
Right.
It's basically an instant job dictionary.
Right. So, if you're an official, I mean, this works for officials or freelancers. I feel like the on the fly is a really great weapon for a freelancer because every day is different, every case is different. So, for me with a deposition, I'm probably not going to get a ton of information beforehand, but if I get the case caption, or sometimes they'll include the requests, right? So those questions that'll tell you on a PMQ what it's going to be about. I'll go through there. I'm looking for proper names. I'm looking for stuff that may or may not come up in my dictionary name wise. Something that you can do also with your cat training is, let's say the person's name is Erica. Erica's going to come up. It's a part of Dragon's vocabulary, but is it in there as Erica with a C or Erica with a K? So instead of creating a brief, that's an opportunity for you to actually just train the cat software to say, when you pull in the steno, which in this case is Erica, I want Erica with a K all day long for this job dictionary only. You don't want to put that in your main dictionary. That's an example of a job dictionary. An example of an on-the-fly dictionary that I use are actually my Tran. I say Tran 1 all the way to Tran 16. That can be whatever, company names, something that's just difficult. Sometimes just a tongue twister that I just don't want to say this all day. And then I'll use Kex, so for me, I do Kex with people's full names or whatever. If there's a bunch of different defendants or something, and I don't know if they're going to talk about these people, that's the pre-deposition stuff that I put in. And if you're an official, life is really lovely. You have access to the original complaint, and then you know what the entire case is about. So, maybe 3 to 5 days before your trial begins, you can go through that. You can get your whole dictionary ready before you actually go into court for your trial. Tori?
So I'm going to address the question that just came through because I think it's a perfect understanding. Yes, this is briefing on the fly. This is one of those things where I have a template dictionary with just a bunch of words that I know that my dragon understands. It's my on the fly dictionary. It has words like, for example, my cupcake. I have cupcake and cupcakes, cheesecake and cheesecakes. I have orange, I have banana, I have yellow. I have all kinds of words. I have Beyonce and Jay-Z that I talk about all the time about domestic law. So I have this template dictionary. I literally bring it into my job dictionary. And as Patrick is saying, if it's something I just don't want to say, maybe it's a tongue twister. That becomes one of those template words that I know that I don't have to worry about, right? I know Dragon understands orange. For those of you in LA, Orange County, you guys are not going to be able to use orange because it's going to come up too much. But for me, I live far enough away from my Orange County that I can say it. In my particular situation, this is a theory that I like to espouse. When I was learning how to dictate, my trainer, Dessa Van Sciver, used the word cupcake to when Dragon wasn't as fast as it is now, she would say cupcake, and that would let her know that that was the end of her dictation. Like if she was practicing or doing a test, once her output got to cupcake, she knew that it was done. I use cupcake because I don't want to say somebody's name all the time. You know how when they do a question, they always say Dr. Whoosie Watson or Mr. Whoosie or Officer whatever. I say cupcake as the witness is honorific. So it's Mr. Dr. Officer Reverend whoever. And that's my on the fly for that deposition. Um, and then when you talk, let me just check, make sure the question here is writing on the fly, same as briefing. Yes, generally. Um, but we have other ways to brief as well, and I can share that later in another slide.
Yeah, we're going to keep going with the presentation. We see your questions. We'll get to them, but we'll try to get through our slide deck and then we'll go back to the questions because we may have addressed some of them already in the deck.
Yeah, and that
So,
and the reason I did that was because I actually saw it right when I was getting to the cupcake and the on the fly.
okay. Okay, so here's the next one. And let's see, I'll read that. Okay, so training Dragon and creating better recognition. So, voice writers, we can add our data to the SRE by analyzing finished documents. I mentioned that just a second ago. You can get your judge's script. You can make a really pretty transcript, the one that you turned in, and then you take that one, you feed it back in. And what that'll do is it will adapt to the sequence of those words in your Dragon. And so when you redictate it the next time, you probably will be writing high 90s, And I mean, even I've kind of played around with it a little bit. You can even slur a little bit at that point, but it understands kind of where you're going. I don't do this a lot just because I'm a freelancer and I got really superstitious about it because every day is different. I don't really want my Dragon to be trying to predict what something's going to be. I think this works really well for jury charges, though. Pattern jury charges, they're going to be the same. It'll help you out. And oh, that's the next one. And so the engines learn from sound patterns in the frequency. And so many new reporters that you guys are underutilizing this tool, but this is something to help you to increase your recognition. You still obviously have to be the one dictating. You still have to dictate, but it will increase your success, your accuracy.
And let me just chime in on this as well. So the way the engine started, we had something called best match, right? And the idea being, if the engine wasn't sure what you said, it would guess based on what was the best match in that situation, right? Like it sounded like this, and I've got this phrasing. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to analyze these documents. Well, now I have a 100-page transcript with like 500 Keek markers and 500 CAC markers. So if I, as a court reporter who is having, maybe it's the end of the day and I'm getting really tired and I didn't have a hard Keek, maybe I only said Keek. My drag is going to go, yeah, but where that lives in this dictation style is it's after an answer and it's a new paragraph. It's probably not the word key. It's probably keek because of where it lives and how frequent it happens. So for us as a voice writer, we want to give as much data as we can, as long as it's good, clean data, to Dragon to help us be better. And just to touch on the analysis that Patrick was talking about as well, you can do this in job prep as well. You can make lists for Dragon and say, hey, here's a bunch of words that are probably going to show up today. So even if you don't get a lot of information on your notice, you might get the name of the law firm, the name of the caption, the name of the witness. You maybe could go look the witness's information up on LinkedIn, and you could create some data to give Dragon that morning to just say, hey, here's what's coming.
All right. And then we've got the next slide here. So how do the voice writers actually take down the record? And I actually want to pass off to Tori to talk to you a little bit about the hardware, and we'll
Okay.
see what we can do here to tag team on it.
Okay, so when I started, and Patrick brought this up about this, the original steno mask, the Horace Webb steno mask. If anyone has ever seen Top Gun and you saw the ginormous, oxygen mask that the flyers had, right? It's their whole face. That's what we started off with, and it was big, and it had this big handle, like um, a roll of paper at the end, right? So you could hold it. And it was huge and it covered your whole face. And I loved that mask. That's what I started on. I have a big mouth, y'all. I have a big face. And I'm also classically trained in vocals, right? So I know how to, as I would say to the West Valley folks, chew my words. My enunciation and my diction is fairly crisp. So I loved that mask. That mask was old school. It had the ginormous outputs, the big ones. Like if you remember the VCRs with all the plugs in the 80s. Now we're down to smaller masks. They're much more compact. They don't cover as much as your mouth. They're more ergonomic in terms of they fit really comfortably in your hand. We do have the availability to do hands free, whether it's something that goes around your mask like an eyeglass holder. We also have goosenecks that you can lean into so that your mask is held onto it. And everybody's face is different. So Patrick's got a longer face than I have, so he may use a different mask than I use. And they also have face pieces. So some people use a face piece that only covers their mouth and they have their nose free. I use the kind that goes over my nose because that's how I was taught right on the original steno mask. So I'm used to that. So there is no right or wrong way for a mask to be set up. It is individual and what's going to work for them. We must make sure that we have sound dampening in the mask and if possible outside the mask, right? It's because the whole idea is we're not to be heard, right? So we have to make sure that we modulate our voice, but that we also keep that sound as compressed as possible. So everybody's going to be different. I use cotton nursing pads as well as the foam that comes with. I have something that goes around my mask. I've known people who've used like it's not duct tape. It's like that the duct cushioning around their mask. I've seen people use socks, koozies. It really depends on what works for you. But the goal is that you've got to have a mask that has a good fit, a good seal, and that allows you to get good breathing because you do still have to breathe while you're working. And one of the things
And
that sorry, go ahead.
oh no, no, go ahead. I was gonna go ahead and continue what you're
I
saying
was
there.
what I was going to say is whenever someone asks me what mask do I get, I say I don't care what mask you get, but make sure that the mask that you get allows you to have two outputs. One for the real time into your computer, and then one to record your voice notes in case you have a catastrophic failure. Because for voice writers, my dictation wave file, that is the record. Okay, it's not what Dragon gave me, it's what I said. So, in order to ensure that you do not have any catastrophic failure, you must have two outputs to make sure that if your computer, because we know me, I break computers left, right, and sideways. If I have a computer crash, I can still make a record with my audio backup of my notes. Go for it, Patrick.
Right. And, I was just getting ready to say that. And that was kind of the crux of my Facebook post, which is for a voice writer, your voice notes are the record. And the misconception there would be that, the skill that we have comes from the SRE, but it's the opposite. And like, we're more accurate than the software is. And that's been the whole conundrum we've been in using, Dragon for all these years is it wasn't made for us. It's not tailored to what a voice writer does. And I've met, some young reporters in California that even call Nuance, and they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about because their original product wasn't designed for us, and we're a very small, subgroup of users that use it. Onto the dictation skills. This, to me, is kind of your personal kind of theory about how you do voice writing, your breathing, and this is the breathing is really important. I couldn't really tell you how I breathe, but I get it done somehow. But I can't say I'm a voice writer that takes a lot of deep breaths or anything. I just have learned to just kind of, gradually kind of get a little air or, pull the mask away from my face a little bit. But it's not this dramatic, it shouldn't be this dramatic moment for you to breathe. You have to, I guess, master the skill of breathing through your nose. And that would just depend on what mask you have, maybe. I've got a talk tech, which doesn't cover my nose, it's beneath my nose. So breathing, that's probably why it's just not really an issue for me. Your posture, that's for all court reporters, right? So the way you're sitting, and Tori can probably talk to you about how that might affect your vocal cords,
Eh,
your posture, that's related. And then trailing, this is a big one where I think that's more of your theory. I don't trail very much at all. Like I like to work right on top of the attorney. As they're speaking, I'm going. And when they stop, I stop. That's kind of how I am. But like I mentioned earlier, it just depends. I mean, if they're talking really slow, it's like, okay, here's a day where I need to group my words and trail a little bit in order to get things done. And this will also vary. Tori is a very brief heavy voice writer, and I'm not. For Tori, trailing would give her time to think of the brief that would go there instead of going word for word. So it has its benefits, and that's kind of theoretical to who you are as a voice writer.
yeah. So in terms of the breathing and the posture, um, recognizing as you sit up, and this is good for machine writer as well. I mean, you want to have oxygen coming in. So if you're hunched over, obviously you're not getting good breath through your diaphragm. You're not getting as much expansion from your lungs. For me, because I learned on the mask that covered my nose and my whole face, I actually learned to tilt breathe. So I have to stop dictation. I lift my mask, I take a breath, and I keep going. So, and that's old school, right? That's where we were. And then trailing, as you mentioned, as a machine writer, right? I'm used to staying 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 words behind, waiting to see if I am hearing, oh, there's a brief form coming up. Um, and the same thing too is that has anyone ever, put a period in a new paragraph with the witness and oh well darn it, now they've continued on. Well, if you trailed enough, you didn't have to put that new paragraph in. There is a macro that you can do to bring it back. So again, it is personal preference. And I'm going to add on to the other skills here. One of the beautiful things about being a voice writer is you generally have one hand free. You might have two if you have a hands-free device, so you're able to take notes. You have paper notes that you can take, whether it's a name, a spelling, you want to check something, you want to keep track of your exhibits. You also have the ability to edit in the transcript, like since your computer is right in front of you, you can be making edits right then and there. Globals, it's a lot easier because with the machine, you have to have both hands on the machine, and unless you're really adept at editing on the fly from your steno keyboard, you're not going to be able to make as many edits in the actual text. Whereas in voice, I'm able to make some really nice globals right then and there as I'm in there doing it. So there are some really interesting positives in this regard with having hands free or one hand. And here's our masks. So I use the mask on the far right. That is the Dragon Martel Dragon mask, and it comes with the USB with the Dragon hub. And then you see the second one with that curly cord. That's the one that plugs into my backup audio. The one in the center is the AudioScribe AccuSpeak mask. The one on the left is the TalkTech. I think that's what Patrick
I
uses.
use that, yeah, top tech.
And I just took a picture of one here. This is a gaming mask. There are several startup companies that are trying to create these sound dampening masks where you can game and not be heard. I've also seen ones that like go around your neck. So I've not tried them. I don't know if anyone's actually using these, but as someone who's interested in tech, even though I break it, um, these are things that are out there, and maybe at some point, if I have $300 lying around, I might try one of those and see if it works. But these are the three generally types of masks that are out there right now.
Tori, if I could just interrupt 1 second, that top left one that I see with the woman with the arm.
Yeah,
That's the one I personally got a picture of that someone sent me and said, this looks like a COVID mask. Is this voice writer actually using a voice mask? And there were mics inside of it. So it does, I guess, look like, I mean, it looks like there's something underneath it, but that's a legit mask. Yes?
yeah. So I went on and I looked for these because I actually saw one at Kickstarter about 3, 4 years ago, very similar to this. So I went on and looked and see, and this one, let me see if I have a link to that. I can tell you what the name of the company is. It's called Metadox, Metadox, and it is a gaming mask. Um,
Okay.
and if anyone does any gaming, you know that you're connected and you can talk to your gaming players. So again, I've not used them. I know there's stuff out there. Now, my question would always be, do they have enough outputs that they can make, one that I say is your audio backup, right? That goes to your, backup voice notes. That would be my concern. I don't know. I've not seen one in person.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think next
Sorry.
slide. Yeah.
I just commented, I'm an official in LA County, and I know of a voice writer in LA County who uses the Metadocs and actually sent me the link to if I wanted to try it out. So it is it and he loves it. He adores it.
There you go. Yeah, I've never seen one, but I think one of the nice things about this profession is we have all kinds of options, and you see what works and what doesn't work, and everybody is different. You know, Patrick uses his mask. I loved my old mask, and now I'm using the dragon mask. Everybody makes the choices that works best for them. I'm gonna do the similarities and takedown. So one of the things that I love about having done both is that I can take what I knew from one and apply it in the other. So combination strokes. If you write your entire left bank in the K stroke, you get QOK. That was the theory I learned. I can do the same thing in voice, right? I can say Kiki, because Kiki is actually a name. The vocabulary already knows what it is. I can go into my Dragon vocabulary and I can find that particular name and I can say, this is what it sounds like. It sounds like Kiki. Then I go to my cat software and I say, okay, when you hear Kiki, when you see Kiki come out, I want you to give me the Q bank and the OK. And so it's the same thing. I can do the same thing that I would do as a machine writer. The same with briefing. I don't particularly do a lot of court, but burp, BURP for burden of proof. I can use burpee, even though I hate them. I could use burpee as my burden of proof. I've never done a gym deposition, so I don't think I'd have to worry about doing burpees. But so now my reporter brain is going, okay, what can I use from my old theory and bring it to my new theory? I have a couple of other ones as well. When I was a machine writer, when I had an acronym, I would write the acronym out. Like so for FBI would be F long IB. And then I would write words, WRDZ, and then in my dictionary it would be Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I do the same thing in voice. Anytime I have an acronym, I'll say the acronym, the letters, and then I'll say the word words after it. And what'll happen is I'll go to my dictionary, my cat dictionary, not my vocabulary, because the acronym's already in the vocabulary and the word words is already in the vocabulary. So I don't have to do anything there. I just go to my cat and I can say, okay, when you see FBI words, steno, FBI words, in my text, I want you to translate Federal Bureau of Investigation. So that is a theory that we can use. And what does that do? That helps us get more accurate output. Same thing with triggers, with macros. When I want to insert a time in my transcript, I write time. And my software goes, oh, hey, that steno stroke came out. I'm going to go grab the timestamp from my computer and throw that in. And I can do the same thing in voice. Now I can also do the same thing with date, right? If I know there's a date that I want to put in there, I can make a certain macro. If I just want them to say this was on 12/27/2025, and I just said the numbers 12/27/25. If I said date, if that was my trigger for the macro, it's automatically going to format it. So the theories will work either way. And the idea is to get the cleanest output from the shortest steno strokes.
And something I'll add here too, with just being a voice writer, is pay attention to your screen. I mean, Dragon is pulling in phonetic sounds. Sometimes it's wrong, but you might notice that the sequence that it's putting out is very irregular. It's not something that'll ever be a conflict for you in real life as a working reporter. So you can change it, you can modify it and make it work for you. So because I found, I'm sure Tori has found, but Dragon will reinforce its bad selection if you do nothing to correct it. So then,
Yes.
so usually when I see something like that, over the time of you being a voice writer, you'll identify those moments and say, if I don't fix that conflict, it's going to do that all day. I have to correct Dragon right now. Either, and I'll say this, when you have a cat system, the correction that I actually do in Dragon becomes very little. I can't tell you the last time I've done anything in Dragon. Everything is done in Eclipse for me, because Eclipse you can change, as Tori is saying, the spoken form to whatever you want it to be in the written form. So realities for the working reporter. So Tori, I want to let you start, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, so
Okay.
what we've noticed is that people are using either high-speed processors with business-grade computers or gaming computers because they have excellent sound cards as well. And we are now, at this point, able, with the processing speed, able to get a real-time output. However, it's not automatic and it's not magic. I mean, things have to be worked on. You must continually work on your vocabulary. Go back in, like Patrick said, if you have had a problem with something not translating, it didn't understand you correctly, you have to go in and correct it. And you need to make sure that your voice codes are working for you. At some point later, I'll share one. But here's where I think there's a little bit of a breakdown. A newer reporter has really not had the opportunity to be out in the world long enough to understand how all of the all of the systems work together. They haven't had the experience. They haven't heard enough words. They don't have all of the things that we may have had after a 3 to 5 years working on the job. We just haven't heard it all yet. So they're still in that learning process. Whereas an experienced reporter, someone like Patrick or like me, we will see something and go, I've got to change that because that is just not working for me today. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And we can recognize that in the moment. Whereas someone who's newer may not necessarily really grasp what that's doing long term. It's just not some, they're so focused on living in the moment. I got to get all this down. Whereas I have the speed, I have the capability to work on the fly. My brain is at that comfort zone. Go
Right.
ahead.
And, so the presentation we gave at CCRA was about, well, how do you guys start your stepping stones to getting to real time? And the analogy we used, me and Danielle, was really, it's like riding a bike. I mean, it really is. It's like, I know when you're a new reporter, and this is where the patience comes in for anyone who's a machine writer or anybody who's a judge or whatever the case may be, because I know they've got some strict requirements in California about at least being able to provide you real time. But I know for a new reporter, you're just trying to survive. It's like all these words are coming, all these people are talking. It's like, I'm just trying to keep up and get to where I don't drop. Once you got to that point where you're not dropping anymore, then you can, work into, I'm looking at my screen now, I'm seeing where my conflicts are, and I'm doing something to fix my conflicts. And so the realities for the working reporter is, you can solve your conflicts. In that presentation, we talked about how the advanced voice writer, real-time voice writer, your day is very intense because you're making your changes on the fly a lot of the time. But if you're not there yet, it's fine. It takes you time. I would say, I was 3 to 5 years. And I've heard from Tori that's pretty much the same for a machine writer before you got a real good grasp on legal term just in general. 5 years in, it's like, well, I know there's going to be an objection. I know this question is going to be one where they might ask for a read back. And it's like your brain is already zoned in on one function, and now you can start thinking about everything else. Oh, you're talking about an exhibit, but you never said it was an exhibit. So all this stuff takes time. So definitely take your time, be cognizant, work to improve every day. Because for a voice writer, it really just starts. All this work just starts when you get certified.
Yeah, and actually that is on our next slide. The myth is that we can do real time from graduation day, and that's true. We can write real time every day, but is it real usable real time? Probably not, because we just haven't got the time in our system yet. So yes, I can write real time. Is it going to be beautiful? Probably not. I'm still seeing what voice codes am I using, what words are not coming out correctly, and if I've not heard a word, did I say it right? Did they say it right? Because honestly, as we all know, people don't speak cleanly. They mispronounce words. They say things wrong. They use the wrong word. And so we're just, like Patrick said, hanging on for dear life. And if we don't know it's the wrong word, we're going to dictate the word that they said. So I think again, it's giving a little bit of grace to get as many words under somebody's belt as possible. So the more vocabulary that they can learn, the more experience they can get, the more variety that they can be exposed to, the stronger and better that they will be. And again,
Right.
I
Yeah.
do think it's 3 to 5 years. That's what I was told as a machine student. It was 3 to 5 years before you're really out there able to produce saleable real time, unless you're a prodigy.
And what you don't want to do, even when I was in school, I'm sure this still is a thing, but I went to a brick and mortar in Atlanta. But when we would have speed building class, I was one of the few voice writers who would do it with my screen open where I'm looking. A lot of reporters got into the habit of taking down with their screen halfway shut because they just don't want to see, how bad they are. And it's like that's the worst thing you can do if your goal is to ever write real time. And that probably goes for both methods. It's like you have to look at what your issues are. You have to stare them in the mirror if you ever want to write real time and figure out creative ways to fix them all. So that's the biggest thing with real time. And for I would imagine here's what I'll say, and I've been jumping ahead on some slides, but like for a voice writer, it's a game of whack-a-mole every day with real time, providing real time to a client. Because we don't have the benefit of what machine writers had, which is you had to learn a whole different language. You know what your theory is, you know how to stroke. It's all predicated on you, really. With a voice writer, English is our language, right? So, we start out in our theory at a higher speed, at speaking speed 120 usually for most voice programs, but you don't have any real experience with what your conflicts might be, how phonetic they are and all that stuff, because you're just not calculating for that until you get into using a speech recognition engine like Dragon, and then you're like, what's wrong with this thing? Basically, it's how you live because you're like, I said that as clear as day, and I'll say this for voice, like with a medical term, that can be something that's pretty, it can be easier for you because Dragon has a lot of medical vocabulary built in, but what becomes really important for medical, in order to get Dragon to recognize it, is your pronunciation. So if you're working one of those jobs that's medical malpractice or it's a doctor expert depot, how you pronounce things is incredibly important because they're probably in there. It's just you have to be really precise on those days.
Just as an aside with that, for voice, the longer a word is, the more accurate we can be. Whereas in machine, the longer the word is, the more opportunities we have to mess it up. So as long as you enunciate clearly, yeah, the odds are very good you're going to get a really nice translation.
Right. All right. So what's being done? Tori, you want to start here? I feel like we've been hitting this one all day, but what do you
Yeah,
got?
yeah. Basically, I am using all of the tools that I used as machine writer. I'm just adding the speech engine. So my speech engine with my cat, my mask is plugged in. That's my input device. To just pretend that's my steno machine, right? I am creating a real-time file, and I always, when I was a machine writer, I said yes, record audio. So in addition to my real-time, my voice steno, it's also grabbing the room audio. That is allowed here in North Carolina. I don't even think about it. It's just part of what's done. It is an audio sync. I dictate into my engine and it comes out through my cat. And I'm allowed to see both the translation and my voice note. So I can see what I dictated and what was modified. If I create the backup audio, it is time synced. So if I go back in my editing and I need to check what I said versus what was in the room audio, I can play either or. And again, I can see everything on the screen. And because I am familiar with my foibles, just like I was as a machine writer, I know what my struggle strokes are. So when I look at my screen and go, yep, I didn't dictate that correctly, and that's why that came out the way it did, I look at my notes. But it is in real time. I am dictating every word or creating or writing that macro that I have for that combo phrase. I think next slide. Yeah.
Okay, so tips for improving your recognition in real time. I see a question from Christine that kind of probably segues into this. But dealing with The small words, honestly, are the most troublesome one. One for the voice writer, as Tori mentioned in the previous slide. That's probably where your accuracy is a little challenging. But so document analysis will help you. Dragon needs more context. I mean, for example, if you made a new brief, you couldn't just sit there saying the same brief over and over and over again. It's like build some context into it, feed Dragon an entire sentence and give it some context. So that's the biggest thing. And then, the CAT software has some other ways to reinforce those selections from Dragon also, which would be adding it to a job dictionary, adding it to your main dictionary, that sequence of word, and just you can grab that section and it will reinforce it that way also. The special voice codes, that's a biggie. I'll say this: I had when I was in school, my friend Kelly, she was a really good voice writer. Her Q&A was phenomenal. She was just really good at Q&A from day one. And me, I'm like jury charge lit. That was my go-to. I was really accurate on those. And then as I became a real-time writer, I got better. Q&A is my bread and butter. But what was the shift for me was I spent a lot of time trying to keep up when I was doing cross exam. And so these special voice codes is a way for you to not have to do that. This is something that to think of too. We're certified voice and machine. We'll talk about later, but 225, right? Am I speaking 225 words per minute on a cross exam? No. You better have enough briefs to where that's not the reality for you. I'd say it's probably a 50 word per minute swing because of how many special voice codes I have built in for those common phrases. Yes, sir. No, sir. For me, and by the way, there was a whole theory book from Betty Keys at my school, so Betty put all her preferred briefs in there for you. And I found I couldn't remember those things for crap. For me, I'm the kind of voice writer like I have to make them myself. And when I do, then I'll remember them and I'll have problems. So my yes sir is a yeps, my no sir is a nopes, so on and so forth. I speak with a little bit of a lisp, and so I put S endings on a lot of my stuff because it'll help me. So just figure out what it is about your speech that's unique. Maybe you have an accent that's unique that can help you out. And then it talks about your standard codes. So this is pretty, there's some reporters it doesn't work, but JudMac is pretty much the go-to for a voice writer. I know some people use something different because it might not have worked. Okay, so Tori is one of those.
Yeah.
And then this was from that CCRA presentation we gave, right? It's like for a voice writer, for any court reporter, you need a system of how you do things. Can you change it every day? Sure, but this slide here, these tips for improving your recognition in real time, this should be your go-to because your environment changes every day, but you need something that's the same no matter what. What am I getting at? State attorney, defense attorney, SPE1, SPE2. Always doesn't matter who these people are. You program the name and you keep it moving because you need something that's gonna get your nerves out, and really you can rely on your briefs that you already built, and they won't change like those days change each time you work a job. Did you have anything else you wanted to put here, Tori?
I think I want to do the continual observance here. So one of the things that got me was actually two things. One, I got really tired of saying I don't believe and I don't believe so. I didn't have a brief for that. It was the witness kept saying I don't believe so, I don't believe so. And I said, okay, what am I going to do? And so I went back in my head, how do I write it in machine shorthand? And it was yobble and yobbles. Like, okay, what am I going to say? Like Patrick, it's got to make sense to me. I don't want somebody else's theory. My brain's wacky. So I came up with gerbil and gerbils. So I don't do pet stores. Gerbil is a word in my vocabulary. My dragon knows what gerbil sounds like. So I say gerbil for I don't believe and gerbils for I don't believe so. I don't have to do anything in my speech engine. It's already a word. I just go into my cat software and go, okay, when you see gerbil, it's I don't believe. When you say gerbils, it's I don't believe so. That was me going, I don't want to say this all the time. I'm getting tongue twisted. The next one was I kept seeing wisher come out. Wisher. For me, that's a dandelion that's gone to seed, right? It's a wisher. Well, that is what is your. Every time I said, what is your? Dragon said wisher. I said, fine. Wisher it is. So now my brief form for what is your is wisher. Why not use
Right.
what Dragon wants to give you? Well, okay.
And this segues into the the kind of reporter that I am. I have briefs that I use, but for me, I don't know, probably 4 years ago, my computer brain was just like, I'm not fighting this thing all the time. What did you think I said? Okay. And if it's a continual, if I noticed that it didn't matter how good I pronunciated it, it was still giving me something else. And this is the criteria. It has to be something that won't be part of your day to day, that it's pulling, right? If that's the case, it makes zero sense, but it's phonetically correct. Change it to whatever you want. Trust me, your life will be easier. Just give it up to Dragon. Sometimes it wins the battle. And so, like, I put one in the chat. If it's no, I don't. I say no, Don. That's my thing there. But basically, what this does is that gives you a chance to breathe, right there. You got all these special briefs in. You're breathing for one, and you're confidence building while you're on the job, because we're humans, right? We like instant gratification, which is so cool about voice. It's like you put one of these codes in, you see it works. That feels really good. Now you're ready for the next part of that testimony, and everything's flowing for you. That's where your confidence will come from and your skill. And it should feel contagious. You should want to do more of that. How do I get more of these instant gratification moments when I work a job?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's about being cognizant of what you're doing and what's happening in real time. You have to be aware of what is actually occurring in the moment. So this was me. I was just trying to say, okay, let's compare what's happening, machine versus voice. So I'm writing on my Steno machine. I'm dictating into the mask. My language is the steno theory with, whatever language you learned, StenEd, Phoenix, whatever you learned. And then I'm using my voice with my speech engine. And then what is the tool? The tool is the steno machine. That's how it gets to translate. My tool is my mask or silencer. It's getting to the engine. But either way, the output is coming into the CAT software. So we're doing the same thing, just using different tools. Hands, voice, steno theory versus the engine plus our own personal theory, and then the tools. And that was it on that slide, I think.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll just add is, like with the stenographic thing, I know that's a touchy point for a lot of machine writers. The thing is, stenography, it could be remnants of it. It doesn't, there's no equation of how much you have to have, right? That varies for voice writers. Tori, her dictionary probably looks like massive compared to mine, because mine is more built on working within my CAT software because I paid a lot of money for it. So if I can make it work for me, I'm more likely and inclined to use what's already there and make that my brief, if it is a brief at all. So there's different ways for voice writers to utilize shorthand, but we're all using remnants of it. It just, it's a matter of how much, which can vary. Let's see. Next slide here. Now we're gonna get into some myth busting. I think these might be touching on some of the questions we got from Michelle. I'll read the myth and then I'll let Tori tackle it. So the myth was voice writers are inferior because they have less schooling.
Yeah, and I don't think this is necessarily true across the board. I think everybody is different. However, I would say that voice writers do take generally less time to finish their programs, but many of the reporters that I'm seeing come out of voice writing programs have come from another profession or field. Many of them have baccalaureate or master's degrees. So it's not necessarily schooling per se, it's the actual training to be a court reporter. And I think most people learn to be a court reporter once they finish their program. That is their first, 1 to 3 years on the job. That's when you actually are basically thrown into the fire. And it's always going to be the people who really, really want it are going to be the ones who are putting in the work to be the best court reporters there can be. So it's not necessarily the schooling per se, but it is the life experience and the desire to be the best court reporter they can be.
Right. And to piggyback on that, a lot of the issues I see, because I have executives from some firms that reach out and, oh, the voice writer I had was terrible and this and that. And my thing is, really, it's I never get complaints about the method that we use. It's not about the method. The complaints are typically around their ability to be court reporters. I have fought with Texas about this forever, and their standard here, which is they want to know what you got on the test. You know, when you initially tested, did you pass on one sitting? What did you get on your test? That's really important to them for some reason. And I'm like, that tells you absolutely nothing about how good that court reporter is. When you're thinking about vetting a reporter, to me, I want to see your transcripts. I want to see your transcript. I want to see your work product, because that is the job. The skill of voice writing isn't the issue. A lot of the issues that I hear about has to do with the transcript production, how things look, whether they had any grammar training, and then a lot of it is just managing your backlog, right? You know, that's something. If you're a new reporter, it's just a part of your life. MVRA, we have a firm owners committee. We just offered a session which will keep running for 3 more weeks. We have a provider who's a therapist at an inpatient clinic in Arizona, but it was very therapeutic. We were court reporters, and we have a very mental job, right? And so it was the realization for me that my life, my needs are actually predicated on my clients first. I put them before my basic necessities a lot of time. And so I think when you're getting into this industry, there's a struggle, right, with your work life balance, and a lot of reporters are going to have to come to terms with that. And what's the best way to do that? How can you get better? Write better real time. The better you become, at writing when you're on the job, the better your life is going to be. You can get some of your work balance, situated. So yeah, and the other part I'll say is every school really should be offering you some form of medical and legal term. If you're still a student here, here's what I did. I was a transcriptionist, or a transcriptionist mostly for reporters, for working reporters. And I had 3 or 4 of them, because their styles were different. And then that's how I made my style. The way I make my transcripts now is a conglomerate of taking the good from each one of those individuals to create who I was, and continuing that. Tomorrow I've got continuing education about grammar and punctuation. It's a continuum, so you have to look at it that way so you can become better. So here's the next one. So are they really dictating? I feel like we covered that pretty
We
good, but
we
I'll go
pretty
to
much did.
Tori.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I really think that the last little bit is really important to understand. Um, there's no such thing as an untranslate in voice writing. The speech engine is always going to find a word based on what we said, what it sounded like to the engine. So with voice, there's no color trigger in your output, right? So in machine writing, if my cat software knows that if it had to use its AI to figure out what I wrote because I dragged a letter or I dropped a letter, it's going to come out red. I don't get that. I don't get that visual trigger as a voice writer. So I need to know as a voice writer what my trigger words are. Community and committee is one of mine. But the bottom line is speed kills. Machine or voice, speed kills. It could easily be that stuff is just not coming out cleanly because the speakers are going too fast. And I think everyone can recognize that this has happened over the past decade. People speak faster, and we as court reporters need to rein them in. And that may mean going to our judges and saying, "Hey, judge, if there's a way, can I interrupt to let them know they're going slow? Or if you see my real time is getting a little sloppy, can you remind counsel that the court reporter in the room needs to make sure that they can understand everybody, and we may be certified at 225 or 260, whatever our certification level is, but we certainly don't want to do that for 8 hours of a day. Obviously, there's got to be a better, cleaner way to say that, but that's where we all need to advocate for ourselves. We are dictating, but the faster it goes, the sloppier you get, especially at the end of the day. Just like I drag my S's at the end of the day, I'm going to start slurring at the end of the day. Next
Yeah,
slide, I think.
and the only thing I'll add here is, the good news is our clients they feel very secure with us as court reporters, and so I think that's a lot of it. So I kind of it's kind of a sometimes kind of a compliment, because it's like you're just assuming that I'm going to get everything you're saying when you're going 260 words per minute. If you're looking for ways for you to butt in, something that I say to them is, if anything you're saying is important, for the record, you need to slow down. If it's important, you're like, otherwise you're running the risk that it's going to run into crosstalk, and there's nothing I can do about that. And then I work for a very fast-paced federal judge a lot of times when I fill in. And if you're in one of those courts, I know people are going to want advice about that because, kind of hard to tell a judge to slow down. You try sometimes, hopefully you try to do that in chambers or something, but, not in the moment. But go with the court. Whatever the court is saying is probably the most thing that's coming out of somebody's mouth. Just that's a little pro tip for you. Yeah, if the judge, if you work for a judge who just interrupts the parties a lot, go with whatever the court is saying. Is that's the best you can do if you're in that kind of environment. Oh, did I go too many? There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Potential hazards.
Yeah, this is a big deal. So, again, I think I mentioned that I'm a classically trained vocalist. Your voice is your instrument. If you do not take care of your voice, just like if your arms give out on you like mine did, if you cannot use your instrument, you cannot work. So, when a voice writer is fatigued or sick, their recognition can suffer, right? So we need to make sure that we are staying on top of our game. Um, as I mentioned in the previous conversation, just like at the end of the day as a machine writer, I may have a lot of S's at the end of my words because my pinky's dragging. I may slur at the end of the day because I'm just fatigued. I'm breathing into a mask all day, so that's the other thing, right? So you're not necessarily getting good clean breaths. You're going to get a little bit of your exhalation just by the nature of what you're doing. Also, your vocal cords are basically muscles, right? And what you're doing is you're putting them under stress by modulating your voice, by bringing it down, because we're not really dictating like you were dictating like this, and it's not quite the same as our normal voice. Some people are whispering. I don't whisper. I think that's really stressful to your vocal cords, but we need to stay hydrated. We need to take breaks, right? We need to modulate properly. All of those things, if we do not do them, we can put ourselves out of work for 6 weeks to 2 months by getting a vocal
And,
note.
and something I want to bring up too is, I was 23 when I started as a reporter, and so I was still when I was in college because my first career was actually auto body and paint. But so the guys that I went to school with, they were like 50 and 60 for whatever reason because it was free for them in Georgia to go to college. But my nickname was Bulletproof because I was young, and they were just like, "Oh, this guy's bulletproof." And so I was still young as a reporter. I felt bulletproof also. Segueing this to say the food you eat matters. Okay. So like for a voice writer, you got to figure out what that is. Like for me, honey Dijon, like mustards, soda, super cold water. That's going to bother my voice. You have to figure out for you and your vocal cords what it is that's going to keep you going. The longer a trial goes, if you got those 8-hour days, you're in a week long, 2 week, 3 week trial. You really got to rest. It kind of sucks for your personal life, but if I'm on the record for 8 hours, like I'm probably not talking to anybody for the rest of the day. I'm just chilling out, or I'm definitely not, exacerbating my voice. For some voice reporters, maybe you got a warm up exercise that you like to do because that's your tool, right? So you'll probably find a lot of helpful information from reading what a singer would do. But
No
yeah,
dairy.
I'm right. No dairy. Fortunately, I can have dairy that doesn't bother me. But like the room temp water is a big one. It's kind of how I learned, and it has a lot of truth to it. It replicates the warmth of your own saliva. It keeps everything just flowing. So I try not to do anything with food or drink that's going to irritate me for the rest of the day. And this is probably for all reporters. Just don't eat a lot of food to the point where you're ready to go to sleep. That's a tip too. Keep your lunches really short. Don't eat too much and overindulge.
I wanted to point out something in here because I didn't really mention it. I think you brought it up briefly. Even though at the end of the day I may be slurring and my engine doesn't recognize me, Patrick said, I understand myself perfectly. If I were to play back my voice track, I totally can understand myself. So that's when you're fighting the engine, right? I know what I said. I can hear it. If you were to play back my voice track, you would understand me too. It's just that the engine didn't because it's a computer. It's looking for absolute crisp. It has to match. That's one of the things about computers, right? They need to be perfection. It has to absolute match. And so I can understand my slurred speech, but my computer may not. So that is definitely a thing to consider when we talk about our voice notes and things as we move
And
forward.
and just to segue on what Tori was just saying, the other thing, when we start talking about AI and some of those things that may come up, into our industry, accents is a big one. I mean, for a voice writer, for a machine writer, it's a little different. Two things I'll say about that. One, for a voice writer, you're speaking at the same time other people are speaking, so that's a difficulty in itself. And two, when it's accent related, with their accents, you're converting that back into very proper English for your speech engine. Like if I got a British dude, I'm not speaking like a British dude. Like, it's like I still have to be very disciplined, which is hard for humans because if you're married or you got friends, you might find that you're borrowing some of their language, the way they talk, even your own accent. You're fighting with that to make sure the speech engine is getting what it needs, which is what Tori was saying. It's preciseness. So that's something I just wanted to piggyback there.
Yep.
So who's making the record? I think we just kind of touched on this. What you got, Tori? You got
Yeah, so I just put up here, there's a lot of stuff out there right now with Google and the AI assist, Google Translate especially. I have an ethical problem with this. I'm a deposition reporter, or I do work for private businesses or private associations, which is not public record. Well, obviously, I can't use something like that because it's going out into the air, into the ether. This is not public information. So I personally, this is not with my NVRA hat on. This is Tori with 30 years of experience hat on, going, this is not a good idea. Um, I really do not like the AI tools necessarily for Google Translate. That said, I think we all as court reporters do use AI in some fashion, and I think we have a slide later on that. But I think we need to be very aware, whichever method we use, of what are the legalities of using something like this? What are the potential ramification, the third party access to all this? So I think this is a conversation we all can have about what is the proper use of these AI tools in terms of Google Translate.
So next slide is about one-to-one protection. So the voice writer is in a closed circuit environment. So our mask, we use our mask to mask to the computer, to the engine, to the cat. So that's our thing. So we're not like online where the internet's and involved and all that good stuff. We disable every other mic that our computer has. That's another thing because it has to be focused on the sound card, which I'm sure most of you are just using the Andrea pod. Tori, did you want to cover any more of this slide deck?
I don't think so. I think it's basically that we are in control. It's us making the dictation, going to our individualized engine, to our individualized cat.
Right. And so if you're a voice writer looking for another speech recognition engine, because, I'm aware there's, more, there's gonna, which is kind of cool. It's cool, right? I'm gonna be considered probably a dinosaur voice writer, like my aunt is, where there will be a speech recognition engine, or there may be several that are actually built for a voice writer, specifically where Dragon was never that. And so all of these tips and tools that we've given you, all the headaches that we've endured trying to get the speech recognition engine to understand us may not be a problem, as the tech advances and is built geared specifically to a voice writer. So that's something to take into account. But saying all that to say, if you're going to use a speech engine that is not Dragon, a good question for your cat company, if they're the ones providing the speech recognition engine, would be if it has to be connected to the internet in order for you to use it. For me, I don't want to use anything that has that capability, because to me that I don't know, it's like I don't know what's out there, so it's like I rather not. Matter of fact, when I was learning voice writing, I was taught that you never have your internet connected at all. It's disabled while you're writing. So that's just how I am. Do I still do that today? Not really, just because Eclipse has Dragon doesn't have the ability for you to be doing all this multitasking. If you're just writing in Dragon, your cursor has to be there. There is no option for you to be outside of the Dragon box and still taking down. So with Eclipse, or ProCat, CaseCat, you have that ability to kind of word search on the fly and say, man, I don't want to get that wrong all day. So I do use that, but the actual speech itself for a voice writer, that is not connected to the internet, at least with what we know to be our primary use, which is Dragon software for right now. So great. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about testing requirements. I know this is a question I give presentations to court reporting firms also about this. So we'll talk about it. Tori, I would love Tori to go ahead for this slide here. It has a lot to do with her current certification at MVRA.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I worked in the 90s for a mostly mask reporting firm. We had a couple of machine writers. And back in those days, we had different certification levels. So when I became a voice writer, my certification as a CVR was at 200, 225, and 250. And I did that. I had CAT software at that point. I was using Eclipse with SpeechGate, but it just wasn't fast enough. I could not, it didn't understand the 250. There was no way in the world. So I actually transcribed. I did use it, but most of the words weren't there, especially at the 250. Now the lit was not horrible, but I listened to my voice track and I passed that. And then the next year I went for the merit, and that is 225 lit, 250 jury, 300 Q&A for 5 minutes with 97% accuracy. Again, no way in the world that my CAT software was going to understand in 2005 me at 300 words a minute. I passed. I am a CVR CM M because in 2012 the standards for NVRA certification were brought to come in comedy with the NCRA standards. So I am perhaps a dinosaur as well. I am certified at 300 words a minute Q&A from my voice notes.
Okay. And then we'll talk about how do we compare today, right? So this is NCRA to MVRA now. A little bit, to segue, well, to go back on the last slide, Tori was talking about, initially MVRA was trying to, be seen as, as a method of writing that was proficient. And so a lot of the certification standards at MVRA back in the day had to do with that. It was, we're gonna test at a speed higher than the NCRA just to show everybody that we're capable of doing it and we're really good court reporters, right? So, as that, progressed into modern day, I believe, it was 2012, 2013, we went back to the standards that NCRA uses, which are the same speed. So voice writers and machine writers, if you're an RPR or a CVR, you're equivalent. The only difference with our test is that NCRA tests remote and we test in person. The reason we do that, I'm sure everybody knows, if you've had to take a CVR, is that audibility is a huge thing for voice writers. We have to make sure that you have the skill of taking down without being heard. So that's a biggie for us. And that, we don't have any difference at any level. So going down, you'll see the RMR. I say this a lot for firms because it's like they barely understand what machine writers do and all the certs and what they mean. So, I give them a quick rundown. Hey, somebody comes to you, they say they're a CVR CM. This is what they mean. They're an RMR equivalent. If they say they're a CRR, they're an RVRM. MVRA, we have two real-time certs. I didn't put the other one on here because there's no direct comparison. But the baseline RVR, you can take, a 180 lead, a 200 jury charge. Is that it, or is it higher speed than that?
It's all 180, all of them.
Oh, all 180. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize. Okay. So I should know that it's past, present. But I have a really good credentialing committee, so I don't have to know everything. But yeah, so the RVR is that baseline 180. You can achieve that. I believe the accuracy is 95% though, right?
It is.
Yeah, it's 95%. You can achieve that at a 180 pace. The RVRM is exact apples to apples with the CRR. It's 96% real time on a 200 word per minute Q&A. So you have to have that level of proficiency to get it. And so both certifications were validated by the same entities, Comira and all that good stuff. So there really is no difference there when it comes to us. I didn't include a slide, but we know California has reciprocity with MVRA. I know, that was kind of a sore spot for some folks, but really prior to that ever happening, voice writers were testing almost 80% on the California CSR. So there was a lot of proof to back up that, hey, for these voice writers, they probably can get through with this skill reciprocity because they're really proficient. Yeah, so I'll move on to the next slide. Let's see here. That's pretty much it. So thank you guys. Now we want to get into your questions. Tori's got, I'm going to stop sharing because Tori has a lot of the questions that she's answered for you guys. And then we'll take new questions here. I'll start going through the chat and kind of seeing what we have. Actually, let me start off, Tori. Let me do one I was kind of getting into. And the question was about whether or not a voice writer can provide real time without being connected to the internet. The answer is yes and no. If you're a deposition reporter, the answer would be no. You have to be connected to the internet. I believe for the big three cat companies, I don't know that there's a way to provide it without. Um, well, I guess the other way would be if you were going to have a wired connection. Let's say you had your own iPads and you were in person. You could be wired up,
Yeah,
where they're getting your Eclipse screen or whatever your
we
deal
used to do
is.
LANs. We did little
Yeah,
local area
I was going to
networks.
touch on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you could do LAN. So for an official, a LAN would be probably a requirement. I know in federal court, it's like I can't connect. I have to just. It'd be much in order for me to help the judge. I got to be connected to their LAN. I got to be in the U.S. government system and running on a LAN to provide real time. And then partly too because a lot of courtrooms are super old and like the Wi-Fi is terrible. So it's like it's better if we're all on the same local access network and then you can provide the real time that way. So Tori, you should have screen sharing if you want to screen share, if you just want to read
Well,
it.
I don't know. I mean, I think we covered most of them. Let me go
Oh,
back
good.
here.
Okay.
I do have a couple. Hold on. Let me get that. Screen share screen.
I also have a
While you're
couple that
doing
were
that, go ahead,
submitted.
Michelle.
I also
Uh-huh.
have a couple that were submitted by members after I sent you, so I've got a couple more to add.
Okay.
So,
Let's take one of yours, Michelle, and then we'll
okay.
go. We'll get
Okay,
Tori if you want to look through the other
so
ones.
one of them is if your voice notes are corrupted, what do you do? So, like as a steno machine writer, I've got my mini, I've got the backup on my card, I've got the machine storage, I've got audio, I've got all kinds of different methods. So, if your voice notes are corrupted, what do you do?
So I think Tori touched on this earlier when she was talking about the mask having two what do you say, prongs or whatever.
I call them
Um,
tails. Yeah, I
tails.
mean, yeah, I'm a big believer in redundant systems. I mean, there's any number of ways you can correct for that. You could split in multiple ways. I mean, I know in my Zoom I have like double splitters. So if I have a computer failure, I still have my backup for my voice notes. But there's no reason you couldn't also add. Let me see if I can find. So I've got a splitter. You could literally have two recordings going. I mean, the beautiful thing about your mask is since it has the two outputs, one is going to your computer. You have this other one that's just this mini pin. You can split it to two different backup. You're not gonna, God forbid, unless you're Tori, you're not going to have a massive computer failure with a massive audio backup failure. Obviously, you
Yeah.
need to make sure you have enough batteries for your audio backups, but generally, no. And the thing about your audio backup, you can, at least with Dragon, you can have it. It's not ideal, but you can take that file, your audio file of your notes, your voice notes, and you can run it through Dragon and it will translate for you. Kind of like we used to offload that floppy disk and it would translate. Um, and it will go through Dragon. And you can import the text file from your Dragon. Here's the problem. It's not going to be formatted, right? So all your keeks and cacks are going to be in there. So you're going to have to be doing a lot of globaling to get it. It can be done. I've done it. I literally had a computer, literal blue screen of death on a deposition an hour away, and I was in person, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing it old school. And that's the way you do it. And that is a really good skill. And I might say, as one of the tests for a program out in California, maybe if I were a school, I might say, hey, you need to transcribe a 5-minute dictation straight from your voice notes with no dragon, just to see if you could
Right.
do it. I mean, that might be a really good test. Um,
Right.
and I think this kind of goes with that question. I actually picked up the backup recording usage. The question about backups. I'm a scopist as well, in addition to being a reporter. I moved out to a very rural area, not a lot of deposition work, but I loved scope. And every single court reporter that I scope for, machine writer, says, I want you to transcribe from my backup audio. Fine. And that's what I do. I listen to their backup. I look at their steno notes, and then I look what they wrote. I listen to what the audio was. Which was right? Did they hear it wrong? Did I hear it wrong? Whenever I make a change that I know is questionable, I will go in as an editor and say, "Hey, check that." But I can listen both to the room audio and the voice audio in that same text file as a scopist.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
And
so
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Patrick, please.
No, it was just on this slide, just about the backup, because I know that's like really contentious. I think, subconsciously, I think what we're trying to do right now is trying to protect our industry. And so the word digital is like a trigger word right now. The word AI is a trigger word, but we're using both of these things. But they're the talking point here is the human component. The human is working. The human is creating the record. You are the record. Your cert, it's really you, right? So my suggestion is down at the bottom. There are some reporters who invest in all these high gain mics and they got separators for each attorney and all that. I don't do that. And the reason being, I buy very cheap digital recorders, because they're only as good as the human ear. So if I can't hear you, then it doesn't hear you either. And I do that to protect the record. You don't want to create an environment where you're no longer interrupting an attorney because you're relying on your backup. You're like, oh, I invest all this tech, my backup got it. I'm not going to stop anybody. And that's not where you want to be as a court reporter. You want to make sure that your notes are going to match. You can hear. So I've never bought a digital recorder that was more than $50. Like, it's like I just have that. And when I'm scoping, I don't know. I've been a reporter for 13 years. I can't imagine a world where it's not from the backup. I don't. I think at the CCRA presentation, people wanted to know what my dictation voice was, and like for me, I'm very different from Tori and probably a lot of voice writers. I probably haven't heard my voice in 10 years, because I write real time and it's there on the screen. I'm reading phonetic sound. I don't care about my voice really. If I have to go to my voice track, fine. But it's there and it was correct. I put a lot of time into it. So that's me personally. And Michelle, you
Okay.
had something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's really no different from, just to touch on your last point, it's no different from me as a steno reporter who, if somebody calls into question my transcript, the court reporters board is going to look at my notes just like to make sure that those match, just like I'm guessing for you, they're going to go to your voice notes, not your room audio, to make sure that matches. Is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And
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 that's
and
that's the slide too.
right.
Oh,
And
sorry.
and
Okay.
that's how we test too with MVRA. I know there was a lot of talk about that. When they come in to test, those reporters, they have to dictate from their voice. They don't have access to the room audio. It doesn't record that. They're disqualified if it does, because we do the same thing for MVRA exams. It has to your voice notes have to match. And if it doesn't, you're out. So there is no possibility there, that somebody has one of our certs and they do that.
So just one related question, and then I'll just pass it over to you, was about readback. So when you're reading back to a jury or in a deposition, whatever it is, and you get to a point on your real-time screen that you couldn't understand, are you then listening to your voice notes or are you listening to your room audio?
So if you're asking Patrick, I'm not trying to brag, but it has never happened. My real I write high 90s every day, so I've got the 96%, the RVRM, and that's at 200. So my Q&A in the real world probably feels like a 180. That doesn't happen. My readbacks are always from the screen. I don't have to. I don't know the last time, and I think the reason I'm like that is impatience, I think, related to processing power. When I was in school, I noticed that with Dragon, if I took that cursor and put it at the start and I'm like, play my voice, it might chop it off. It was all jumbled up. And I'm like, the attorneys don't want to wait for that, and neither do I. So I was very early in, very big, with a very big focus on phonetic sound. But to answer your question, if I had to, Michelle, it's not the room. It's not the room. In the moment, it's my voice. It's what I
Okay.
took down. Most voice writers are listening to their voice track.
And I would agree with that because our voice notes are the record. So we should be listening to our voice.
And then one question on that point in the chat is how does the audio of you addressing the attorneys not come into the transcript? I'm guessing you're pulling your mask away. What is it?
So this is a good one. So like I don't know. I've met voice writers in California. Y'all are babies, and maybe your schools didn't teach you, but like you got shortcut keys, right? So like F11 toggles my mic on and off. So if I'm about to talk, F11, my mic is off. Let's have the conversation. So that's how I address it. So that's very different for a voice writer than it would be for a machine writer who can probably type what they're saying as they're having this conversation. For us, I don't know if y'all do.
No,
Okay, you
that's not
don't.
my
Okay, good.
my
So
brain can't
yeah.
output and input.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, but yeah, so that's what we do. You toggle, you don't want to just have your mic on all the time. And that can be for other reasons too. For example, I hate headphones. I'm when I'm in person, I like the human voice. Like that's my
Hmm.
thing. Even a courtroom, like they'll say to me, like, oh, we have a really good mic system here. And I'm like, this is gonna be a long day because it's like that doesn't equate to me. That sounds like I'm gonna struggle all day because this attorney's probably gonna be leaning in too much, or whatever the case may be. So, but yeah, hopefully that answered it.
I
Yes, thank
haven't.
you.
I had another slide. Hold on.
Okay.
This one had to do with AI, and I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of how voice writers are using AI, and not recognizing how machine writers are also using AI. Um, we're all using AI in some form or fashion, right? So the speech engine is automatically an AI, right? Because we're dealing with a program that's listening to us and taking data and meshing them together. As a machine writer, I was using AI when I was using the drag and drop feature. When I wrote a stroke and my G came in extra, my AI in my dictionary would go, well, that's an untranslate, but I hit the drag and drop. Well, go and look at my dictionary and see if the G not being there creates a word. That's AI. That is a computer programming. Brief it, auto brief. It's saying, hey, you've written this and I don't know what this is. And you've given it parameters. Hey, I want a brief to be with these particular strokes, or with these particular letters, or not. So that is using AI. So we're all using it in some form or fashion. The question is understanding what the tool is and how it's working. This is a kind of tool that's internal that we're using versus the AI that's out there on the web. And I think that's where we need to really understand the difference between the AI tools that we're working with. I don't have a problem with using AI. I mean, the better my real time is, if I can use macros, if I can use briefs, if I can use whatever in the moment inside my system, I want to use it. If
Yeah, and
this,
I think like for legislative committee at NVRA, we'll be putting out a lot of documents, but the conversation here is and this is where I think like a lot of machine writers initially with the original voice writer may have had issues. It was the use of this digital and not understanding where the speech is coming from and all that. um, the difference here with method will become two things to me. Where this court reporting industry is going, it's your accuracy and it's the fact that we have humans working. I think that's the biggie, is that there's a human that's responsible for the record, is creating the record. The record is not just happening. That's the difference between digital and AI. So who knows better than a voice writer that AI is not good enough? It's us. We have to use it every day. It's not good. It needs my help. And so, the shift for the legislative committee at NVRA will be, well, yeah, we know there's some tools out here that essentially are acting like a scopist, and they might, give you some suggestions from the room or whatever the case may be. If that's what you want to do, all good. But when we certify you, you're certified to do it on your own without any of those tools. And it's just a personal choice of who you want to become. I would say, for me personally right now, because I did get to such a high level in writing real time, the odds of those things helping me are very slim. They're probably going to piss me off, so it just depends. If you're a court reporter right now, you're a baby reporter in California, and you've got some requirements of your job, that see to it that you have to be real time and you need a boost. If that's what you do, hey, it is what it is. But the important part is you need to still take down the record, because when we talk about legislation, we don't want to create an environment where we're all meshed together and they're saying, well, what's the difference? We know that you're not taking it down anymore either. We don't want to see that day.
And I think you brought up a really good point earlier. There are some courts who, well, the entire session has been a fabulous point, but this one in particular stood out to me about the reality that, I hear oftentimes I'll get a phone call, hey, this judge doesn't want this voice writer anymore because he or she can't perform real time, and he or she has been out of school about 6 months. So the reality is no different for me. It was 3 to 5 years before I was, willing to, back in the early 90s, turn my screen around. That's how we did it back in the day, or we had a little
Yes.
black box that everybody was hardwired to, but I
Yep.
won't go there. But again, it's not a right out of school thing. And I think that's one of the many common misconceptions, is that you should be writing real time right out of school. So for any of you in the room who are new, or relatively new, or students, just keep that in mind. It's a skill that we all have to develop over time.
I wanted to address one thing that I see as a mentor and a trainer that I think is really important for anyone who's working with new reporters, whether you're machine or voice, is that, as we mentioned before, you don't know how to be a court reporter yet, right? As you mentioned just now, Michelle. There's so many things that we need to learn how to do. We need to be time managers. We need to manage our backlog of pages, especially in court. Need to understand procedures. What do we do? Who do we talk to? What are the forms that we need to fill out? How do we actually produce a transcript? I mean, many court reporters aren't shown how to actually do an index, how to do their pages. They're just kind of thrown into it. And actually, if you're a freelancer, you need to know how to be a business person. And I think there's a lot of soft skills that we as mature reporters can really step up our game to assist our new reporters to say, listen, this has been a great career for me. Here's some of the tips that I wish I had learned when I just got out of school. In addition to all the things we talked about earlier about understanding how your software works, understanding how to dictate cleanly, how to write cleanly, how to be that all around fabulous court reporter, and to recognize what it is that is your strong suit and what is your weakness, and focus on the weakness to bring that up to the strong suit. But that was
And
that was all
and
I wanted.
And Michelle touched on this in the beginning. Why are we even doing this? Why do I do it personally? I want to make sure there's enough content out there for a machine writer who may be skeptical, so that they learn enough about our method that they can go to bat for us. Because Michelle mentioned this infighting is not helping us. We're focused on the wrong target. And it's been that way for decades in court reporting. There are real enemies that we all need to be focused on. And if you don't know this, I'll tell you. I mean, a lot of these court reporting firms, these are straight up real salespeople out of college. They don't care about what you do. They're selling a service and a product. And so, however they have to do that, they will do it. If the industry doesn't have court reporters, they will move to whatever will allow them to keep this billion-dollar industry. So, you need to support one another. If you have questions about the method, then so be it. But what I've seen largely more than anything is that a lot of the things that these new voice writers are struggling with are things that a machine writer can help them with, which is there was a question about that, how to manage your backlog. That's interesting. So I'll tell you, I started my career in Georgia. In Georgia, when I came out of school, there wasn't really a shortage, right? So I define these as two different things. There was a reporter's market and there was a firm's market. I came into a firm's market. If I told a firm no, I couldn't cover a job, they were going to call me again. I was like blacklisted. That was a wrap. You never said no. When I was in school, they're like, if you get a job offer, you say yes, even if you don't want to take it. And so back then, my backlog wasn't really up to me. Fortunately, now I would say it's a reporter's market. We're seeing that you guys can negotiate whatever rate you want, because that didn't used to be a thing either. And when I came out, I was paid on receivables, which means I'm paid when the attorney pays. which could be 60 days, and I'm working every day. I'm like, I don't have any money. So we're very fortunate, that the industry has evolved to where it is now. But how do you manage your backlog? I would say if you're a freelancer, don't take more than you can handle. I mean, you're going to sacrifice the quality of your work and put your license at jeopardy. Right now in this market, you can pretty much handpick your work and take what you can handle. So that's number one. If you're an official, it would be. I'm trying to think back to when I was an official, how I would handle it. Well, it's a little different because you got 30 days, right? So that's your initial, but you can always ask your judge, for a little leeway and see if that's possible. And you need support staff, that becomes a thing. I think for a lot of officials, if you're in a busy court, you got to find a good scopist or a good proofreader. My proofreader is a grammar teacher at a court reporting school. She was a machine writer. She's a retired machine writer, 25 years. And so I feel really good when she proofreads my work. It's like, man, we're both in on this. It's good to go when we give it to the client. That's been
Yeah.
my system. Other people will use a scopist, but you have to create a team.
Can I just chime in on this? There's also tools out
Please.
there, right? There's free tools out there. I'm using, let me see if I can find the name of the program. I'm using Trello, which is a free program, Trello, and it's basically just you can create like a management, a workflow management with little cards. There are paid programs. Cenovate is one of them. I use Google Calendar with colors. I have red for due dates. You can use a spreadsheet to keep track of how many pages things are and when. There's a lot of free tools that you can use out there. I definitely agree. I'm a scopist. Like I
Mm.
used to scope between 700 and 1,000 pages a week for people. That was a yeah. So knowing what is on your calendar, number one. Number two, knowing like Patrick said, knowing how much work you can do. You have to know how many pages you can edit. If you're going to edit your own stuff, how many pages an hour can I edit? Because if it's a 200-page depot, if you can scope 20 pages an hour, that's 10 hours. Do you have that time to do it? You're going to send it to a scopist. I can scope a little bit faster than that. So maybe I'm going to scope it myself because it's only going to take me 5 hours or whatever. You need to know how productive you can be and where the best use of your time is going to be. Is it better? I scope my own stuff and send it off to two proofreaders. That's because I know the quality of my work. I've been doing this forever. A new
Right.
reporter may need to scope their own work, but send it off to two proofreaders as well. But scope their own work because they need to see what they're not getting, and then they can fix either in their vocabulary or in their CAT software. So
And
it's a learning thing.
And that's a big thing too. You don't want to give all of your work away to Scopus or something because that's a lot of missed opportunity for you to actually find issues in your writing. So if you got a CAT system um, like Dragon, when I just had and I used Dragon for 7 years before I had Eclipse. And Dragon is like every morning before a job, whatever I fixed the previous day, I had to redo it again. All my conflicts I had to go through and fix all of that stuff because Dragon doesn't have a way for it to memorize that forever. And CAT systems do, so Eclipse is wonderful. It's like when you are going through and scoping your work, you don't need to be hitting that backspace button. You need to be looking at the phonetic sound. What was happening here? Is this a learning moment for my CAT software, for my Dragon? So I don't have this issue again. So you can get to that day where you're writing real time. I'm a manila folder guy. That's kind of my system. I don't know why I did that, but that's just my thing. So all my jobs are on there. I keep a little tray and they're in order. Which one's coming up? Which one's next? Which one's due? I write down whatever their requests are. So you can do it that way too. And then to me, a lot of those ways are like playing defense, right? Some of the things Tori was talking about to play offense, to manage your backlog, write better real time. It's like because you're losing a lot of money. I when I finally got out of the brain fog one year, I like to do this around Christmas when my year has ended. I evaluate the whole year, right? How much was I paying my scopist? How much, what was happening? When I did that one year before I dedicated myself to my real time, was probably my fourth year. I just broke even on every job. I wasn't making anything. There was no gain. I was giving my transcriptionist $1.50. I was keeping like $2 or less. Really, back then it was less. I was probably getting $1.50. So it's like you're not making any money, dude. It's not going to change until you write better real time. So how do you get there? Invest some money into getting to that level. So definitely evaluate yourself when you have a moment to improve your writing. That's a good way to keep up with your backlog.
I think the biggest takeaway here for me personally is not only dispelling the myths, which I think you've done a great job covering, but ultimately that we both, as machine writers and voice writers, we face the same issues. We have the same things to tackle: record keeping and invoicing software, and I've got the fancy skylight calendar on my wall, but at the end I'm a paper person and I use Depo Book, right? So we all have our own ways of dealing with the profession and learning how we get there. And so I just wanted to thank both of you sincerely for coming and giving this presentation. I'm hoping maybe we can repeat this at convention in a year. But I put
Yeah.
our CCRA email into the chat. I'm sure that if you have questions for Tori and for Patrick, they would be happy to answer them. I'll filter them to them as we receive them. Patrick, you have something to add?
Yeah, you know what? Let me do that. I see there's a lot of questions that we didn't answer in the
Mm,
chat. Let me
there
do
are quite a few.
this. This thank you screen has hopefully I'm sharing. I don't know what I'm sharing. Okay, there we go. The thank you screen, it has the email addresses where you can reach us. Let me oh well, it did something. I don't want to do that. Okay, wait. Slide
Got to go to
tweets.
the end.
Hopefully there's a faster way to do that. No, probably not.
Control page down? No?
Maybe
Control
there
end?
was. I'll be done by the time I
There you go.
there we
There you
go.
go.
All right. So if you want to get me, I'm legislation at nvra.org. Tori, you'd get her at education at NVRA, or you can just go to Tori's website. She put it there for you. But yeah, there were a lot of good questions that I didn't get to. So feel free if you message that legislation when it comes to my personal, and I'll answer it for you. I guess there's one other question I saw that's a good one about, how do you know if you're dictating too loud? I'm watching the room too, how people are perceiving me, perception, but also a little trick for the young voice writers if you're a deposition reporter. If you walk into a depo room and like there is AC going and it's rather loud, then I suggest that, you dictate when that thing is going on, at the because they're probably not going to hear you over that, so every room is different. It depends on where you are. If I walk into a depot room and where it's a tight space and the attorney's right next to me, I know that's a day where it's like I can't afford to be audible. But I found, at least as a male, that my mask will kind of rumble a little different if I'm being a little too loud. I'm trying to think if there's any other way. That's probably my biggie. I know if you're an official, that's not as much of an issue. But there is a tone that I think you're looking for. If you can hear your voice, how do I explain it to her? You know what I mean? Like there is a way you can hear your voice, but you're not supposed to.
Yeah, well, it's in your head, right? I mean, you can hear
Yeah.
yourself talk. One of the things that I say is, if you're unsure in your practice, set up your equipment at your desk at home and put your backup recorder and dictate and see if you can hear anything other than an occasional whisper, like a sound, like the S's. Then you need to modulate. And I think there was a question about muffling. Y'all, we need to not be talking in our normal voices. You cannot speak like we're speaking now, not in person. You just can't. You must learn to find, as Kim Ray would say, find your voice, find that sweet spot. That's right here. It's not really loud, but it's loud enough that it's in your mask. So it's really it's an art form. You have to get there. You have to find where that place is because your dragon, your engine still needs to be able to understand you well enough, right? So that it's clear in the microphone, but it's not audible. The other thing that I tell to my deposition reporters, whenever you get into those big conference rooms, they have that big long table and you sit at the foot and there's all those chairs. I always grab the first two chairs and I put them off to the side because I want them to be farther away than me. They've got to be at least 4 feet away from me. So if I move those first two chairs and I kind of embrace the entire table end, that's just me. Plus you have the computer screen in front of you too, right? So you've got your mask and you got your computer screen. It's just that extra cushion of space, if you will. That's what I say to my depot reporters. But again, it's about finding your voice, finding that place where you're not damaging your vocal cords, where you're not being heard, and where your engine understands you. It is a really, really finite and small space.
Yeah.
And it's as you get tired at the end of the day, as they start to argue and get louder, mind the store because you're going to start to get louder as well.
And just one more quick comment, if Michelle will allow me, the one about
Fine, please.
Speechmatics. It's a new speech recognition engine, and like it's in beta form. So they're gonna, I'm sure Advantage Software is gonna rely on voice writers, obviously, to use it and give them some feedback. I know Tori's testing it out, so she'd be a good person to email about what she's finding. I'm sure our education committee will probably have a breakdown at some point about what those differences may be. That's a lot to go into right now, but yeah, we're aware of it. If that's what you use, wonderful. Just figure out what's working for you and what's not. I know for me, I'll stick where I'm at just because I don't have that many more years in the game. I hope not. So I'm not looking to change my system, but anyway, yeah. Any other comments you got? Just let us know, and we'll do our best.
Thank you so much. I do want to let you know that we will make the recording available. My bad, I missed like the first, 5 minutes. I think I interrupted Tori when I finally remembered and turned it on. But I think all we merely missed is introductions, and a little bit of that great history at the beginning, Patrick. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. But I will also, maybe you can upload your slides and we can include that, the slide deck. So
Yeah,
we'll
I'll
talk
send it to
offline
you.
about that. Okay,
Okay.
sounds fantastic. We will advertise it when it's available. Thank you all for joining today. And Tori and Patrick, thank you sincerely for what a great service this has been. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank y'all. Okay. Bye.